The nation's vaccine rollout enters a major new phase today, with COVID shots now being offered to more than 1 million younger teens. From today, parents and guardians will be able to book Pfizer vaccination appointments for all children aged between 12 and 15, while families will soon be able to arrange group vaccinations for the Moderna vaccine at community pharmacies.
The changes come as the Prime Minister warned that unvaccinated Australians risk being left behind as the country moved on, and as the Health Minister hinted that vaccines could be offered to younger children next year. But the positive news has been tempered somewhat by the growing COVID case numbers in Melbourne's northern and western suburbs. Further north, some Sydney-siders get more freedoms today despite the Delta crisis spreading to the inner city. Worrying signs there too in Sydney. So let's get more from Lara Himes in Sydney, Steph Ferrier in Melbourne and Matt Doran at Parliament House in Canberra. Good morning, all of you. Matt, starting with you, what's the message to the community as more Australians get access to the vaccine?
Well, Michael, the government is telling Australians who haven't yet got the shot that while it's all well and good for 12 to 15-year-olds to now have the eligibility to roll up their sleeves and get their vaccination, everyone else still needs to show up as well. That not only do they risk being left behind from a health perspective, from that protection against coronavirus into the future, and there are still a significant number of Australians who haven't got the shot so far. Yes, there are a few different reasons for that, whether it's availability of vaccines or ease of access to some of those centres, but also they risk being left behind once the nation starts to open up, with this debate about what freedoms will be afforded to Australians who have been able to prove they've had both shots of a coronavirus vaccine. But this opening up of eligibility for 12 to 15-year-olds is very significant. It is something that had been foreshadowed a couple of weeks ago, and those appointments will now start to be made across the country. In some states and territories, they have gone a bit early and already allowed this, but this is now a blanket rule across the country. Up until now, it's only been allowed for 12 to 15-year-olds with underlying health conditions, those who are recipients of support from the NDIS and members of our Indigenous communities, but this is now opening it up more so, and there is a hope that it will mean more children can get back to school after spending months and months enduring homeschooling. Not only the kids enduring it, but also their parents as well, who have been supervising them. So this is a welcome development for many in the community in the vaccine rollout, and that's a rollout that's going to be increased and sped up even further with the first lot of an extra 1 million doses of Moderna vaccines arriving in the country from Europe next week. Another vaccine deal which the Prime Minister is saying will go further to easing some of the concerns about delays and shortcomings in the vaccine rollout earlier in the year. Michael?
Matt, thank you. So, Lara, you're in Redfern in Sydney. Some modest freedoms come into effect in parts of Sydney today, but there's concern about the Delta strain spreading to areas like where you are.
Good morning, Michael. Well, just like with anything in this pandemic, there's always conditions similar for these restrictions that are easing today. You will be able to mix with up to 5 people who are fully vaccinated if you're in a local government area that is not listed in those areas of concern. You will need to be able to prove that, so either done by paper or on your mobile phone, and that's to ensure that if health authorities or police come to check, you'll be able to produce that evidence. If you are in one of those local government areas of concern, you will now be able to mix with up to 5 people in your household who are also fully vaccinated for an additional hour in the day. Now, we know that the inner city suburbs of Sydney have come on high alert today. That's the areas of Camperdown, Glebe, Waterloo and here in Redfern, after it was mentioned that there's going to be an increasing, or there have been increasing case numbers within this particular catch area. We won't be able to get more direct information from the Premier Gladys Berejiklian in the format of her press conferences today, because as they were announced last week, those 11 a.m. press briefings will cease. We will only see the Premier when she states that there are specific details that need to be conveyed to the community.
Lara, thank you. Steph Ferrier in Melbourne. You're in front of a community school in inner city Melbourne that's now at the centre of a new Delta outbreak.
Good morning, Michael. Yes, this independent alternative school is the site of a new outbreak that has authorities significantly concerned. Urgent investigations are now underway. with at least 30 staff and students now infected. And across the state, we saw 392 new local cases. Around 2/3 of those were in Melbourne's north and around a quarter were in the west. And to help address this, the Premier Daniel Andrews has announced a major vaccination blitz involving pop-up sites across 100 priority postcodes. Now, initially we're going to see around 5 community centres and 8 schools being part of that in the next fortnight, and that will eventually ramp up to around 70 or so sites. The Premier has also flagged that at some stage this week he's going to announce mandatory vaccines. That's not going to just be teachers and nurses, but also a number of other key industry groups as well. And on top of this, just as Matt mentioned, there's those Moderna extra vaccines. Now, the Prime Minister actually announced this and caught the Premier by surprise, saying that Victoria was set to receive more than 400,000 of those doses to help with this outbreak. It was at the same time that the Premier was holding his press conference, and he said that perhaps at the end of it he'd see that he had a missed phone call from Scott Morrison. But this is all really important and welcome news as we ramp up to try to get to those key 70% and 80% of the Victorian adult population thresholds.
Those key thresholds indeed. Hey, Steph, Lara, Matt, thank you all. Meanwhile, Queensland is welcoming back some New South Wales residents, reinstating its southern border bubble. Students and essential workers from 12 New South Wales local government areas where restrictions have eased are now able to travel into Queensland. The changes do not allow for travel across the border for recreational or social visits.